Hello, good evening, and good day to everyone. It's good to be back here. It's 8 p.m. UK time, so it is time to start our IVF webinar. And well, we have another special guest. Kate Kaufmann is with us tonight. Hi, Kate. Please let me
Hello.
know that you can hear me and let me know how you're feeling today.
I can hear you and I'm feeling great. Thank you. Happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you here with us as well. And let me just, of course, remind everyone that, of course, all of our Stronger Together events have been brought to you to support you through those uncertainty. And of course, we know that soon you will be able to start your treatment, etc. But before that happens, we still want to support you however we can with lots of topics, with lots of experts, with lots of different guests. And all those events have been brought to you thanks to our ambassadors and partners. And as always, I just want you to see them all. Without them, it wouldn't be simply possible. So huge thanks for their support. And today we definitely have an interesting topic to discuss. And this topic is what our moms and dads can't tell us. So definitely interesting. And of course, with us today, as I've already mentioned, is Kate Kaufmann, who is an award-winning international author, and she's actually the author of the book "Do You Have Kids? Life When the Answer Is No." So I'm really happy to have you here with us for sure. And I am very eager to listen what you're going to talk about today. And you will, of course, Kate will start with her presentation and will tell you a bit about her story as well. And later on, it will be time for your questions. So as always, I can only encourage you to ask your own questions. And I'm sure Kate will be happy to help you, happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, and I guess that is it from me. Kate, again, it's so nice to have you here. This is your presentation, and are you ready to begin?
I am, and I really admire all of you for coming to talk about the topic that really no one wants to talk about, and that is the what if question is what if at some point in the future, or maybe today, or maybe with your friends that are going through the process, that it doesn't work. What does life look like, and how do we take the focus from creating the child that we want to creating in a different way the life that we may have? Because of course you're investing now time and resources, your bodies, the procedures that are involved in something that is so very immersive, and what might be some of the other outcomes. So this is important, and I know it can be very sensitive. And so we're going to address this topic in a very respectful and empathetic way. And please do let me know if there are some things that you want me to go into further when we get to the question and answers, or if those are those areas that are perhaps tender and we need to talk about a little bit more. We're talking about the process and how it compares to the process of going through the whole process of trying to conceive a child, which has a definition and a stair stepping. And when you don't have a child, it doesn't have the same kind of definition. And so what we really are looking at is how do we explore alternative paths of being in the world as women and men who don't have children. So I wanted to share with you my story. Um, and I'm the eldest of four girls, and there was 4 years until the next sister was born. And so I changed my share of diapers. I told each of the three about sex and what life might have in store for them in that way. I was a quintessential babysitter and was kind of considered lieutenant mom. And so in my 20s, I have to say, and some of this is discovered on reflection, is that I was really quite ambivalent about whether or not I wanted to be a mother. And I found recently an old journal that I kept during my 20s. And it was very touching the way I expressed and was very mindful of the importance of that decision and the outcome on my life. And then into my 30s, so a very few short years after that journal entry, I married. I married someone who was 7 years older than I. So I was 30, he was 37. And after we married, as most couples know, and singles as well, as people started talking about having children and started trying. And as we were joining that process to have kids, we wanted to have kids, we wanted to raise them with our friends. They all got pregnant, and we did not. And instead, we went to the doctor, and the situation was mine, or the understanding of what was going wrong was mine. And just to put it in context, this was back in the mid 80s to mid 90s was the time span of dealing with the system. And I went to my family OBGYN, and at that time, they were learning a lot of things through on-the-job training. And so my workup took a very, very long time. And the end result with that was that there was unexplained infertility. And so we'll just do the best we can. Thanks to getting involved with Resolve, I got in touch with specialists and had a very quick workup that ended up discovering that I had some quite substantial endometriosis. That was dealt with, and then we tried for another several years and ultimately came to the point where we basically had aged out of a lot of the procedures that were available at that time, as well as aged out for the option to adopt, which we did not understand had a time frame on it, which it definitely did at that time. And I know it still does today. And so because we were in a nice suburban school district and had these high-powered jobs that we were saving for college educations, it was time to do a very sharp turn. And so we decided to leave our corporate careers. We decided to sell our house in the suburb, and we moved to the country. And that's why you see this executive and you see this cute little lamb. We moved to the country and we began raising sheep. My husband got a job in the small town near where we lived, and I did some consulting work. So that gives you the context of where I'm coming from. And what I realized, and I realized this relatively recently, is that, well, in the country, I knew, of course, that nobody had kids. You know, I mean, everybody had kids. I had no guides. And so I was lost for a while. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the realization that I came to recently, and I think it helps, again, give some context, is that really no one starts out life as a parent. And I don't know why this never really occurred to me before, but the truth is that even when you have kids, you spend at least probably about a third of your life not being a parent. And I mention that because what that says to me is that we all have a similar starting place, that when we go back to that place, it's not like it's all brand new. We've been here before, so it has some familiar territory to it, from which we can take some comfort, and we can find connections that we may have considered not really as available to us. So I was left alone looking for someone to talk to help me understand what my life might look like now that it wasn't going to follow the path that so many of my friends did. And I searched high and low for guides. I couldn't find anybody to help guide me and answer my questions, but I kept looking. And that was very, very, very important. And ultimately, I did find someone. And her name is Deb. And we enjoyed some lovely conversations together. And then we decided we would branch out and invite other women who didn't have children, for whatever reason, to join in conversations with us. And over the course of doing those conversations, what we discovered is that there was so much commonality and there were so many shared experiences, regardless if someone considered themselves childless or child-free. And so that experience, I've always been a writer. I've never really took my writing that seriously, but the commonality and the need for the information that was coming from those discussions, it planted the seed that there's a book in there. And so I started to do individual interviews with people ranging from their 20s up into their 90s about how their lives had been impacted by not having children. And it was extremely eye-opening. It took probably 10 years, that whole process I've just described to you. And last spring, it came out as a book. Do you have kids? That Caroline had mentioned. That was originally available in the US, the UK, and Canada, and it came out in Taiwan the beginning of last month, and it is going to be translated and released in China, Brazil, some other places. So the conversation is happening, our voices are being heard, and we are on a path that has guides that we perhaps have not even met yet, but they're out there. And so from those common beginnings of starting out not as a parent, that's what gives us license to reach out and to find those people who can guide us along a path. And we're all on paths anyway. We're on the path of life, right? But we don't necessarily know where that path is going. And I have taken comfort in discovering and accepting that we don't really get to know our path except in hindsight. And so we are doing today the very, very best that we can. And we also can take comfort in knowing that throughout the full lifespan, everyone is going to come up against obstacles. You're here in this webinar because you have had an experience of coming up against obstacles. We have choices. You're here again because you have choices to make and are in the process of doing that. And we all get to have those moments of clarity and hope that occur along the path. And we may think that we're on a straight path, and then the path will veer, as is shown in the slide. And it could be through an IVF series that is not successful, could be through a miscarriage, could be through a divorce in the midst of what otherwise was a well-planned life with outcomes that were anticipated. And all of those experiences, I see now, I'm in my 60s, I see now as way stations along a path that we get to discover what is our work and what happens and how we live into our future selves. The other reality is that other people have walked this way before. Guaranteed over time, for sure, we are on a path that is not an original path. It is a well-trod path. We just don't know necessarily where our parts are on the path. And we do know that others will follow us. And so our job is to know that, and to know that along the path, sometimes people are quiet about their stories because they've experienced some hurt. And sometimes people are a little more animated about their stories and may be defensive because they have been put down for where they're actually living now. Many cases without understanding of the people that are talking with them. And so our job is to find some guides along the path who have followed alternative routes and they can alert us to what might be coming ahead, because we don't know what's coming ahead. And everyone has access to different information and different life experiences. And so the more guides that we can find, and I'm going to talk for a moment about where we find those guides, the greater perspective and differing points of view that we have in terms of age, in terms of life experiences, in terms of men, women, from all different experiences, that will help amplify what our own choices may end up being as we go along. So before we can figure out how to access the different guides, we need to have some sense of where we are. And it could be that we're just looking for possibilities. We don't need to have a very specific place that we're going to, but a general direction. I know that perhaps I am at the point, for example, that I am going to be considering ending my treatment process. So I don't know what comes next. That's exactly what happened to me after we had moved into the country. The going through life without having kids, we don't have a direct lineage. And so the lineage that we create ourselves as we're going along through the process. And so the idea is that we should expect to be confused or disoriented and not clear. And that's what the process of going along the path is to have that propulsion that moves us forward and gets us seeking ideas and options that help us make the decisions when we have the decisions, and help us grapple with what may be decisions that are made for us that we were hoping not to have. So let's get practical and talk about, I want to spend the rest of the time talking about how do we do this? And how we do this, first and foremost, is figure out that you're guiding this. When you're on this path, you get to figure out what you need to know, and you go out and you find the answers and you get what you need. And the questions that you may have and the answers that you need may be things that you don't know now. And so you're trying to discover what that is. I had a woman who came up to me at a book event, and she told me that she was at the event because she had had a serious illness. And during the course of her treatment and ultimate recovery, all of her friends had had children, and she knew now that she was not going to have children. And she said, I need to create some new friendships. And I figured here there would be people who would be more like me, a little further along. And so during the question and answer period, at the end of my comments, she stood up and she basically relayed that story in a simplified version and put out the request. She says, please, I need to meet more people and have friendships with people who don't have children. And after, when I was busy doing my book signing, I looked up and she was surrounded by people. And I do know that, in fact, now she's hosting small groups to have the same kind of discussions that brought me such comfort early on. You may be coming at it from a position of worry and fear. What do I need to know? I need to know I'm an only child. This is another true, all of these are true situations that I've heard and stories that I've heard from an only child of only children. And she's worried about what she does with the family heirlooms. And so she knows to ask that question by looking at what it is she's worried about. Another thing that I know is a propulsion to get answers is wondering. And I've heard from several younger people that they have, for all host of reasons, the knowledge that they will likely not have children, but what they can't figure is they're wondering what they're going to do with the next 50 to 60 years of their lives. And so that was the kind of quest that I got a chance to go through by talking to all these different women and learning in hindsight how they had put their lives together and where they had found fulfillment and alternate paths that they could follow. And I think one of the other propulsions to talk to someone is that sometimes we just need commiseration. I know whenever I found someone who had gone through any kind of infertility treatment, there was an extra sorority with that person, an extra connection, regardless of how old they were. That we had some experiences in common. We had language that the language hasn't changed very much in the time period since I went through it. And so sometimes that peer support is just what we need at whatever stage that we're on our path. So again, I mentioned this earlier. When you're looking at following the path for whatever reason, again, of not having kids, you're the driver of the process, not the technology and the solutions that come through the various workups and responses to our infertility. And it occurred to me that going through the not knowing and going through the process of assisted reproductive technologies, it really does give us some pretty wonderful tools to be able to go out and find the answers to the questions that we have. We are resourceful. We know we're resourceful. We're dedicated. We've gone through a whole process that we're seeking information about. This webinar is a perfect example of how that happens. We advocate for ourselves. And if you're a support person for someone watching this, you advocate for your loved ones, your people that you care for. If you're a physician, you're advocating for your patients all the time. And all of us that are involved with this are sensitive people. So when we're thinking about who to talk to, we have a variety of people, and given all of those tools that we have, we do know how and are well equipped to go take advantage of their knowledge and life experiences to help us on our own paths. And so guides, possible guides, I just want to talk through relatives and friends. We have our relatives, we have our friends. We may be looking for information from them and for support from them in a little different way than we have when we're going through other aspects of the process. And so for me, for example, I know now that as a relative to my nieces and nephews, I'm a completely different resource to them. And I am ready and able to talk to them when they are ready and interested in talking to me about aspects of life that I know several of them have concerns about because they have reached out to speak to me. And every time they do that, I feel a sense of meaning in my own life and purpose in my own life. That said, as we all know from going through any of other processes, sometimes our relatives, sometimes our friends are not are not as understanding and sometimes not as supportive as we might need in that particular time. And so it occurred to me that actually the lower risk sources are probably the harder ones to approach. And that is the elders, our elders and strangers. And elders, I've come to think and to really strongly believe that this work is really the work of elders because we have had a chance to walk the path a little bit further, and we have some context for it, and we can see how lives can unfold. So how do you identify an elder that you can speak with? Well, you can speak with me, and I guess I qualify as an elder now. But you can watch and you can listen to what it is that they're talking about and what matters to them. They, if they're not talking about children or grandchildren, it's a pretty good chance that they don't have kids. And so you can notice that. And so I'm asking you to take a look at people in a little bit different way and be a little, use those detective skills. I was at a retreat probably 10 years ago now that was led by a woman who was then in her mid-70s. Her name is Anne. And that was during a period when I was really struggling with what my life was going to unfold like. And I noticed that in this group, and it was probably a dozen people, she never referred to her children or her grandchildren. And when I brought up the fact that I was struggling with what was my context, what was my life purpose, she said that she didn't. She confirmed that for me. And so I asked her if she would be willing to talk with me. And she was. And now she's in her mid-80s, and now we are extremely close to one another. And she has become a very helpful resource to me that I will support her, and she me. I consider her my non-mom kind of a person. Strangers. I think we've all had that experience of being on a bus or a train, back when we were spending more time on buses, trains. But where talking with a stranger, sometimes we can practice some things, we can learn some things, we can be, in some cases, more frank at a lower risk level. And you can know that a stranger might not have kids because they never ask the "do you have kids" question. And so that would be one guide in, also to notice if what interests they're talking about, that matter to them. And you may also be introduced to a stranger, which is how I found a number of people for my book, through other people that you know. Once you let people that you know and you know care about you know that you want to talk, they can refer you on to some other people that you can have some very straightforward conversations with. And then the last group of people I put on this list are the child-free, which I suspect may be a little surprising. And here's why I put them on the list. First of all, they know the path. They have been on the path for as long as we have, but they have made peace with the path. They have chosen the path, and they have some perspectives that, if you're ready to talk frankly with them, may be very, very, very helpful. The other thing is, it may be that you don't quite have their story clear. I was shocked how many people thought that I was staunchly child-free, that I did not want to have children. And when I first heard that, I was surprised and hurt. It was painful to hear that. And what I know now is that by having that, that we don't easily share our stories. We share our stories when we're invited to. And there may well be some surprises and some illuminations. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit later about self-care. You go there when you're ready. You don't go there before you're ready. So how do you go about asking someone to talk about something that is highly personal, and that very frequently the person that you're going to ask has not spoken much about at all? I'm a big proponent in preparing. You know what you want to know more about. And I think that, as with the question, do you have kids? It's an act of self-care to be prepared for what we want to know. We know we're going to get that question for the rest of our lives, and so we should be armed with a variety of answers to that question, a range of answers, so that we can be ready to take care of ourselves, versus how I did it. I'd get the question, I'd kind of answer, bumble, and then take myself away and go cry a little bit for a while until I figured out how I wanted to respond to that so I could take over what that question was. That's a whole nother thing we can talk about. But the practicing, I think it's fair to have words. I mean, I have a cheat sheet, and I'm going to read some of the questions to you that I appreciate it when someone puts words in my mouth. So here's some ideas of things to say. It's like, could we talk sometime about how it's been for you not having kids? I just want to know some things. I want to know how you feel about your work life. A young woman I asked that of in her, she was in her later 40s when I asked her about that. I learned that she and her husband had, they were contract attorneys, which I didn't know existed, but they sold all their stuff and they traveled around the world for 2 years, doing their legal work on a contract basis, and they could work from wherever they had internet service. So that was fascinating. A question that I have taken to asking, and I'm going to actually answer, is what surprised you about not having kids that you wish you'd known before? And what surprised me, and I will share every opportunity that I have, is that when friends started to become grandparents, that reopened a number of issues that I thought I had addressed and that I had resolved. And in fact, I hadn't. And so I got a chance to then go to some of the resources that I had identified, and guides that I had benefited from on other topics, to then open up the whole conversation about, oh, yeah, now what do we do? Maybe you're confused about something and you want to just get clarified. So to just out the fact, I'm confused about this. Will you share your experiences? I was up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and a young woman came up to me and said that she knew that she wasn't going to have kids. And she just said, can you just tell me that I'm going to be okay? And I was so deeply touched by that. And it's like, I can tell you, you already are okay. And I can tell by the way you're reaching out that that's what you'll continue to do. And so, yes, you are going to be okay. You just don't know what it looks like yet. So those are some examples. Some other questions. What can I expect in the future? In my book, I go through the full life cycle, from how work is impacted all the way through to end-of-life planning and what we leave behind when we die. And what I love is there people will say, I liked the first part, but the last part doesn't really matter to me. And I'll get the exact opposite, depending if someone was older and they're like, work part, So there's constant resources, and our questions are going to change over time. So what if they don't want to talk? You muster up the courage to ask them, and they defer. First thing I'm going to say to you is that it's highly likely that they've never been asked before, and that they haven't really thought about how they would answer the question. And so give them a chance to think about it. And if they don't want to talk about it, that is their self-care and their option. What you might want to do is say, look, if you ever change your mind, I'm still interested. You may want to give them an out by saying something like, I have other people I'm going to talk with, but you're one of the first people I thought of, and so I thought I would ask. And if you yourself bumble as you're asking for someone to open up to you in a way that you think might be prying, please recognize that we don't talk enough about this topic. And so we're all going to bumble and stumble and stutter. And if we notice what worked and notice what didn't, then we can take that and apply it to trying again. If we notice that someone teared up, we can observe that they teared up when they were talking to us about something. We can seek the information that we need, and we can notice the response that it gets. And if we get tender and we want some more protection, but we still need answers, we can go into online and into different places. Gateway Women is a perfect example, there's a number of Facebook groups that are particular to better understanding of how life unfolds when you don't have kids. But I would say with pretty high predictability, what instead you're going to end up with by opening up the topic and asking the questions that you actually want to know the answers to, you're going to end up with the most amazing conversations and connections with people that will last you for a lifetime, with new friendships like I have created with Anne. That you'll get pertinent information that in many cases it will be the first time that the person you're talking to has ever had the chance to articulate, and they may have some discoveries for themselves. And I want to circle back and mention also men. I think as I have gone out opening doors to communication, men have been the biggest surprise to me because they suffer in a different way. And Robin Hadley is doing some amazing work in the UK on men. And he refers to, I had never heard this term before, but he refers to how men get broody too. And what do they do with those feelings? And I have found that men will open up to me pretty readily about what their experience has been. And some of it's very similar to my experience, and some of it is altogether different. And yet there's this wonderful connection that I get to make with guys about this. So if we're going to go through life not having children of our own, I will say that there is no richer time than now for resources. There is so much high quality work that is out in the marketplace. I've listed some of those that I have found particularly helpful. Those books that I have, that's my special photograph that I took there. Those books all came out within the last 2 years. And they're written by people from 4 different countries. I'm sitting there looking at the titles. Yeah, you got the Netherlands, you got the UK, you got New Zealand, you got the US. And I do want to say that those authors, as well as those whose work has come out before. I mean, I have boxes of books on the topics from the last 20, 30 years. We are by and large, not only cooperative with one another, but super supportive of one another. And so you're seeing also resources like there's films. Maxine Trump, no relation to the U.S. president. She is from the UK originally, and she has a public television miniseries that she put up. She has a full-length documentary. There are a number of depictions of us that are shifting, so they're not necessarily the ones that the result is the couple or the woman ends up having a child. Webinars like this, special events, this one is remarkable, as is World Childless Week. Every year in the month of September, there's a week that Stephanie Phillips out of the UK put this together back in, I believe it was 2017. It is chock full. You can go and you can dive into the material from World Childless Week, and men are included there too, as are a wide variety of topics. Podcasts. Here's one that actually is one of my very favorite podcasts on the topic that would be misleading if you just looked at its title, and that is the Live Child Free podcast. It's by a couple, Eric and Melissa. They're from the US. I think they're in Los Angeles. And they went through some amazingly challenging and painful life experiences trying to get pregnant. And so this is them taking on an ownership for this next way of being in their lives. It's them owning their futures. Childless Not by Choice, Sevilla Morgan, has a very heartfelt, beautiful, beautiful podcast. So there's a whole variety, and I've offered a list of resources that follow the slides here. There's also retreats and workshops. Helen Siegel in Australia has done in the past some things in the camping kind of retreats. I have one that's scheduled to happen in December. We'll see if that occurs. Gateway Women put on weekend events and activities. So there is no dearth of resources there, and some of them you avail yourselves of in person, and some of them you do in the privacy of your own laptop. So before we go to the questions and answers, I really would like to reinforce how much importance there is to sharing our stories. And when you ask someone to share their story, you are paying them a huge compliment. You're letting them know that you respect them and care about them enough, even if you just met them, to go at risk to ask them to share some information with you that you need. And when you listen to stories, it gives you ideas of new things that you want to ask about, or ways that you might want to share your information with someone else. And when you're ready to, you will share your information with someone else. And that can become a very empowering way of owning your own life in a completely different way than you ever have before. And then you repeat that, because that's the way that we connect. And it builds levels of understanding, not just between people who don't have kids, but between and betwixt parents and non-parents. And those activities and those conversations, one by one, help dispel stigmas and stereotypes that just are so sticky around the whole experience of not having kids. So we're on a lifelong path together, regardless if we have kids or not. And if we can all include and embrace our different experiences, wow, there's nothing we can't accomplish. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Kate, thank you so much for that inspiring speech. Indeed, that was definitely interesting. And thank you for sharing your story. Yes, and I cannot agree more. You have mentioned this a couple of times, but those kind of topics, so those are not discussed much. And I definitely think it should change. So thank you so much for being with us and being our presenter, and of course also presenting this topic. This is
My pleasure.
definitely appreciated. And I just want to show you that, of course, the Kate has mentioned those books. You've seen them on the photos. So I just want to show everyone that you can actually have a look and use those. Those are the titles of the books, and of course, there is also sorry, Kate mentioned films, podcasts, webinars, websites. You can see them all here. And let me just remind you that, of course, it has been recorded. So if you cannot just simply note this now, you will be able to watch this. And of course, you will be able to see it. But also, I'm sure if you would like to ask Kate where to find them, or what is the name title, sorry, then of course I'm sure she'll be able to help you out, right, Kate?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, of course. And well, I just think we didn't show that yet. So Kate has mentioned also her book. So I just want you to see this is her book. This is her cover. Of course, again, you will be able to check with Kate where you can actually get this, right?
Yep, and you can see there's paths on there in the little topographical map.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. And well, now it is definitely time for your questions. So let me just encourage anyone, if you have any questions, this is your time to, or perhaps like comments, anything that you
Yes,
have in
please.
mind, feel free to type it in the chat section. And there is one question ready. Okay. Kate, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Happy to hear this. Let's go. So, when did you get to the point to accept that you won't be having children? How did you and your partner feel? Did it affect your relationship?
Whoo,
Quite a
boy,
few questions.
yes, and that hits me right in the heart. Wow. You think that some things are all there, but yeah. Um, we got to the point of accepting. Yeah, I can't even say that there was a point of accepting that we wouldn't be having children. It was more hitting, and this was mine, hitting capacity. Um, I I struggled with the the whole experience and the whole process of going through infertility treatments. The drugs made me a little wacky, maybe a lot wacky. I mentioned I was the eldest of four girls, and all three of my sisters have children. Um, and so it was more a reaching a saturation point and a okay, I was in probably my early 40s, maybe it was mid 40s. I need to look at that. When it was like, okay, this is not meant to be, and there's other life to lead. So I struggled greatly with it. My then husband, he 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 what about how do I say this? He was very supportive, and he was also he didn't have the same emotional involvement with the having or not having children as I did. He was looking forward to it, but he was not as emotional. He's not wired the same as I emotionally. And did it affect our relationship? It did. And I mentioned just in passing that he and I are no longer together. We split relatively recently, probably 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And and it was amicable. And when we were talking about it, we went back to those years of going through infertility that planted some seeds that we didn't tend to as well as we could have. And we went through a fair bit of counseling and therapy, but that created some stresses and strains in our marriage that, for those of you who are going through this, put all the care that you possibly can into the relationship. It's a big challenge. It really is. I don't want to pull. I don't want to sugarcoat any of that. So I wish you the very well.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm sure it's not easy, but thank you so much for sharing. This is definitely inspiring, for all so many people. And actually, next one, it's not a question, but something that you should see because I think that everyone would be able to agree with that. So, Kate, your presence and presentation is amazing, so heartfelt, empowering, intuitive, and deeply brave. What an amazing life path you have carved. Thank you. Thank you. And as I mentioned, couldn't agree more.
Oh, that means the world to me. Because one of the things that I've taken away from this whole experience of not having kids is that I actually have, when you have your own child, it's like a laser beam, and you have the opportunity to invest in that child or children, and so you go deep with those individuals. And what I've realized, and through this work, oh my God, it's like I go wide. And there are people, like I did a lot of work helping little kids learn how to read. And I know that those kids are never going to remember that it was me, that it was I, who helped them learn how to make particular sounds. But I know that I had an impact on their lives. And I know tenfold that this work has an impact on women's lives. And I have people in my life now that I'm sorry, getting choked up again. I am just so thrilled to create these relationships that are based on our common experience of being different than mainstream. And it's beautiful. And I've never had a mission in my life until this book came out. And my mission is to open doors to understanding, and between parents and non-parents, because we really are all part of the same thing. We really are. So thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, indeed. Well, what can I say more? Thank you so much. Okay, and there's another one. Are you ready for it?
Oh, geez. Okay. Yes, I'm good now. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So, thank you for your honest and personal experience. Thank you very much for sharing this experience with us.
You know, can I and thank you for that as well, because this work moves. It moves us. And referring back to those small group gatherings, well, we've tried to do it like in 2 hours, and everyone left saying that they had never had a conversation like that before. And so this is just a tiny little example, and I'm glad that that has come across, because that's what the work is. And yeah, it just opens doors to understanding. I have a book group that I've been part of for 20 some odd years, and I made them read my book, which was like an act of courage after after I did that. But and there's a woman who is in the book that's in my book group, and so she and I were the only ones who didn't have kids, and the rest, the other 8 people there, did. And oh my God, we learned things about each other that we had never learned before. I had people apologizing to me for behaviors with their children. I'm like, no, nurse your kid in front of me. That's fine. It didn't bother me at all. um, there's so much to be talked through and to be included that is inclusive. There's no better word for it. It's inclusive of all the different ways of being in the world. So I'm really touched. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are definitely amazed that you've been able to join us today. And well, I can only add one more thing here. It is just so hard sometimes to be around people in France who mostly have kids. It seems that all conversations they'd have is just about their children.
That is true. And that is why that's why I talk about guides. I think about my time and the decision. I tried to second guess myself. It's like, what a dopey decision moving to a rural area, when you don't have kids and are struggling with that. It's like, no, what that did was created the conditions for me to be like immersed in what was going on. So I had to go out and find people to talk to and to guide me. And the comment is exactly another reason why we have to do that, because we need to have some other conversations. And you can put grand in front of the who mostly have kids, grandkids, and grandchildren. It happens again. And so now I'm fortified for those conversations because I have other people I can go to. I have a much more balanced friendship circle. I have family of friends now that I didn't have before. So thank you.
That's really good, and it's definitely inspiring. Yes, as I've mentioned, and there is one more comment. Really, you have a gift of empowering people. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, for your not questions but comments. It means a lot indeed, and so we are just simply happy to be able to spread the word, to be able to talk all about different topics. And Kate, thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. As I've mentioned, sometimes just I guess I am just a bit speechless as well, because it has been inspiring and it was a pleasure to have you here. We will be finishing, of course, for today, but there is one more that you need to see. So thank you very much for such a beautiful, eloquent conversation.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure, and I wish everyone well, and I hope our paths cross.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And of course, I just want to mention one more thing. If you would like to simply get in touch with Kate, you can also do it via her website. I will show you right here. And of course, if you need anything, you see that Kate is more than happy to help you out in any way she can. I am sure about that. So it's katekaufmann.com. So you can, of course, visit this website. And well, Kate, anything you would like to add?
Be well, everyone, in every way. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to mention that, of course, it has been recorded. So if you would like to check any books or podcasts, etc., you will be able to view it, of course. And also, I can only encourage you to join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. UK time. We will be back with another topic. And also, if you simply subscribe to our YouTube channel or Facebook page or Instagram, that way you will know when the new event is coming. Once again, thank you all for joining us. I do think it was kind of inspiring for you as well. We all saw the comments, so huge thanks for those as well. And Kate, what can I say? Have a lovely day, right? It's still
Yes,
early for you. So
yes.
have a lovely day. I do hope we will have another chance to have another conversation like this. And I can only um okay, thank you so much for that as well. There's another comment here. I will not show it anymore, but of course, it's been a real pleasure to be able to take part in this, to be honest. And well, that is it from today. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening, Kate. Have a lovely day. Till the next time. I really do hope so. Thank you.
My
Bye.
pleasure.